You calling in. Cormac already has. Cormac in Kennington, hello.
Sheila, hello. We've spoken before on Ukraine. Look,
Right.
The first thing I'd like to say is, as an Irishman who's lived in this country since 1987, I fully empathise with what you're saying about your experiences growing up and your parents being Irish. But look, I've been studying Russian disinformation, or what sometimes now, Russian hybrid warfare, of which disinformation is a huge part, sometimes called grey zone warfare. And my first big lesson, when I was out in Ukraine, I went to a meeting in Helsinki in the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs with most of the European countries there. And I learned that the European countries who were probably the strongest at dealing with disinformation were the Finns and the Swedes. And the thing that they did, it was about critical thinking. And they were teaching critical thinking in the schools as early as 15 and 16.
Yeah.
And, the internet is not going to go away. And we're increasingly seeing, what you didn't have, or what your parents didn't have to contend with
Was the internet.
Back in the 70s, was the internet. It's here to stay. It's not going away. So this is something I'm very focused on at the moment. We've just launched something called the Information Warfare Initiative with people from several countries, including Ukraine. But what I'm very, very focused on at the moment is we have got to start early, and we have got to give our young people, before they get into adulthood, the critical skills to navigate the internet safely, so they can actually discriminate between good and bad information.
I think 14 and 15 is too late.
You're probably right, Sheila. I'm just quoting an example of who are.
It's good that it's happening. It's good that it's happening.
Yeah.
But kids are very smart. You only have to hear, those lovely programs about the secret life of 5-year-olds, and you hear them. Kids have a great sense of justice. Clearly they're very young at that age, and they're not going to be particularly critical. But they have a great sense of justice. They have a great sense of right and wrong and that kind of thing. And you can start the process age appropriately very early, I think, in teaching kids how to think properly.
Sheila, I would agree with you 100%, but I think I don't think we're necessarily doing it.
No, we're not.
In the school system here in the UK.
And beyond the school system.
Yeah, and beyond the school system. But as you say, I said 15, 16, which was what I was told by the Finns and the Swedes, who I kind of hold up as the gold standard in dealing with this in their societies, because of course they're right up against Russia and have been dealing with Russian disinformation and Russian hybrid warfare. Hybrid warfare obviously going into the malign acts that you were talking about earlier on. But they play together. None of these elements of the disinformation or the grey warfare mix work in isolation. They work together. Yeah. They recruit young people, and we know that young people are, as you were saying earlier on, are more prone to being drawn into right-wing extremism and so forth. And we saw the example during the recent riots in the summer as well.
And the thing is, some of that, as Matthew has texted in, is right to say, some of it is being young rather than being a real threat. Still has to be tackled. But he says, I was much more radical when I was younger. I think it can be part of growing up without being awful. But yes, alluding to what you're saying, Cormac, critical thinking is an important part of it. But I think going back to the disinformation thing, we've seen, haven't we, on, let's just use as an example, university campuses that have set up these pro-Palestinian camps and have been focusing on the plight of the Gazans. All that's perfectly legitimate to do. But when you speak to some of them, these are our students. These are the people getting the highest grades at A-level. And when you speak to some of them and hear them questioned about that region, whether it's about Israel's history there or whether it's about Palestine, whether it's about previous peace deals, they know jack. Half of them know nothing. And that's worrying. That's worrying.
Yeah. I was reading a piece of research only yesterday, which I'm sure you're aware of, and better than 1 in 6 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK expressed the opinion in this piece of research that the Hamas attacks just over a year yesterday, were actually justified. And also, in the same cohort, don't actually believe that 1,200 Israeli civilians were slaughtered,
or that any were raped.
Exactly.
But we've got a growing number of people who simply won't believe anything they're told. I mean, I noticed last night this storm Milton that's heading to Florida. Donald Trump tweeted last night, do we really believe that this is real, that this hasn't been engineered, this storm? He is putting tweets out there suggesting that this tropical storm is engineered somehow to devastate parts of Florida that would vote for him. And people are buying it.
Yeah, could I say something? When I came back from Ukraine, I worked for 9 months as a deputy director of communications to advise on hybrid warfare, basically, from what I'd learned in Ukraine. And we found at the time that there was a saying that I came across at the time: a fire hose of falsehoods. Mm-hmm. Now, with Russian disinformation in particular, where a lot of this is coming from, they're not trying to get us to believe any one thing. They're trying to throw so much stuff out that we don't
believe
know what
nothing.
to believe. And if I can give one example,
very quickly,
when we were working on Skripal and rebutting the huge amount of Russian disinformation, the Foreign Office identified no less than 47 false narratives of who was responsible for trying to murder Skripal, and it ranged from Theresa May to the mother-in-law to it blew in on the wind from Porton Down. It was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that. I have to leave your call there, Cormac, but thank you very much indeed for it. That's Cormac in Kennington. Just quick.